Psycho Karen Bass recently did an MSNBC interview. She left some things out, like giving cash payments to illegals. She's talking about these criminals and how she's defending them. It's just all absurd, and we're going to break it down right now.
Now, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. Mayor Bass, it's wonderful to have you on the show. But look, you have been enduring weeks of protests in your city, all across Southern California, in fact, including a protest that turned violent on Thursday at that farm in Camarillo, California. What is your reaction to the federal judge's ruling to stop indiscriminate immigration raids?
Well, first of all, obviously, we welcomed and celebrated that decision. And I am hoping that it gives us just a little bit of breathing room in this city, because I will tell you, people have been terrorized and terrified. People don't leave home. And I don't think that people quite realize that Los Angeles, 3.8 million people, is about 50% Latino. So when you were talking about the agents, the ICE agents, or whoever they are, because the bottom line is most of the time, we don't know who these masked men without uniforms, unmarked cars, no license plates, jump out of cars with guns and just snatch people and detain them off the streets, grabbing people off of bus stops. It's hard to get your car washed in LA now because for whatever reason, they focused on car washes. And it's hard for me to believe that the cartels are hanging out in car washes. The other day, they decided to focus on gardeners and landscapers.
So one of the biggest talking points for Democrats is what you just heard, gardeners and landscapers. Well, at that marijuana farm, basically, those are gardeners. And what happened is you had a bad dude like this, an individual that got caught who has done 7 years for kidnapping and a handful of other disgusting things. Don't forget, on this farm, there were 10 kids working on it. So you had an individual like him working with kids. That is not good. Think about that for a second. These are the people that Psycho Karen Bass is defending right now.
I want to get to the executive order that you signed aimed at getting more information about those people who have been detained in these raids. Can you explain why you did this and what else is in that order?
Well, first of all, the bulk of the order is actually instructions to city departments on how to protect themselves from the federal government. Just let that sink in for a minute. That I really needed to help city departments know that if you are in charge of the library, you don't have to worry about ICE barging in. They have to have a warrant. And this is how you go about abiding by the law, but not allowing the library to be overtaken by troops. I mean, what you're looking at here was just a ridiculous display of force. They went to a local park and marched through a children's summer camp. And what was that for? They left after about an hour. It was basically a stunt. Actually, these pictures are a variety of different things. But you know, what is the purpose of this except for to leave people terrorized and traumatized? You have people who won't leave their house to go to buy groceries. So now we're having to arrange how we get them groceries. They won't go to work. They won't go to school. And so the bulk of the executive directive was around the city family. But we also are filing a Freedom of Information Act because we want to know who these masked men are.
Psycho Karen Bass left out that she's going to be giving out free handouts to these illegal immigrants, which is also going to, in theory, make them stay home longer. And this will just make it seem like her argument is working. But why didn't she want to say it on MSNBC? Does she not want the liberal viewers to know that they're getting free money? Will it just not look good? Here's Representative Kevin Kiley with his thoughts on the take.
When I heard this news about the cash payments, I thought this cannot possibly be true. But then on reflection, I thought, of course it's true, because California already provides the most generous benefits for illegal immigrants of any state by far. Newsom has driven Medicaid insolvent by giving out free comprehensive benefits for everyone. And now Bass is giving out these free cash cards. And apparently one of the ways you can get one is if you're too afraid to go into work. Well, number one, this fear, to the extent that it exists, is largely driven by Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom, who have purposely incited fear and driven these rioters into a state of frenzy. But number two, if we say that if you're too afraid to go to work, you get free cash payments, I think that all of a sudden we're going to find there are a lot more people who are suddenly too afraid to go into work. But the real kicker in all this is that Karen Bass has chosen, of all groups, Churla to distribute the cards. Now, remember, this is the group that got $34 million in funding and then played a central role in organizing the riot.
So you heard it there. Chirla also is, an organization that backs Senator Adam Schiff. And anyone that backs Senator Adam Schiff, we should all be very skeptical of. But now Karen Bass goes into what the court recently just did by stopping superstar President Donald Trump's administration for the meantime. But we all know moving forward, it is going to get appealed and turned over. But this is what she had to say.
So the court decision that happened just last evening basically said that people do have to have basic rights.
Absolutely. And California Governor Gavin Newsom responded to that judge's ruling and called out President Trump's right-hand man, Stephen Miller, saying his immigration agenda is one of chaos, cruelty, and fear. I'm guessing you can back that up in terms of what you're seeing on the ground in your city. I mean, you're talking about people being snatched up like MacArthur Park.
So that's a lie. No one got snatched up in MacArthur Park. That was a big talking point for the Democrats the past week, saying the Trump administration didn't even get anyone from MacArthur Park. It was all for show. Even Karen Bass said it in an interview. It was all for show. What were they doing? It was a spectacle. But don't forget that the Los Angeles City Council president did an interview the following day after that. And he said, well, I was ironically going by the park on a Sunday evening. When I got there, no one was there. When I was there, I saw flyers on the ground. I picked up a flyer. The flyer said ICE is coming. So it was a little eerie, as he put it. So you can speculate if the California Democrat politicians had a hand in letting people know, don't be here. But it does sound a little fishy. So here's Karen Bass talking about Stephen Miller.
Exactly. I will say that. And we don't understand Stephen Miller. He's born and raised in Los Angeles. And for some reason, he has sought to seek revenge on the city that raised him. And I don't know exactly why he is so inhumane in how he goes about things. He celebrated child separation, and that's what he's doing again, except for it's taking parents away. A lot of the detention started right before Father's Day. So you had fathers that didn't come home on Sunday, and how do you explain that to a 5 or a 6-year-old? Not only did your father not come home, but I don't know when you're going to see him or if you're going to see him again. That is inflicting lifelong trauma on children.
So let's go ahead and get Stephen Miller's perspective on all of this, since it seems like Karen Bass doesn't really know what she's talking about from his point of view.
It's a crime. And again, another example of how the city government of Los Angeles is waging a campaign of insurrection against the federal government. Let's be very clear. What would Los Angeles look like without illegal aliens? Here's what it would look like. You would be able to see a doctor in the emergency room right away, no wait time, no problem. Your kids would go to a public school that had more money than they know what to do with. Classrooms would be half the size. Students who had special needs would get all the attention that they needed. There would be no violent transnational gangs. There would be no cartels. There would be no Mexican mafia. There would be no Serenos. There would be no MS-13. There would be no TDA. You would be living in a city that would be safe, that would be clean. There would be no fentanyl. There would be no drug dens. That could be the future Los Angeles could have, but the leaders in Los Angeles have formed an alliance with the cartels and the criminal aliens.
You can tell Stephen Miller has a lot of compelling points there, while Karen Bass just kind of talks about illegals, focusing on illegals, and it is what it is. That's her political ideology, putting illegals first instead of Americans first, or Angelenos first, because remember, to be an Angeleno, you actually have to actually be a legitimate U.S. citizen. So to end the interview, Psycho Karen Bass kind of gives a little laugh, and she kind of shakes her head, trying to insinuate that she and other California Democrats did not incite violence. And I know it goes past the California Democrats, it goes with the Democrats in general, but she tries to make it seem like and justify that it's not their fault, and points the finger at the Trump administration after they react at a Tom Homan video.
Let's talk about border czar Tom Homan, who said Friday that it is Democrats who are inciting the violence over ICE raids. Let's listen to this together.
What happened in California is just another example of protesters becoming criminals, and they've been emboldened by even members of Congress who compare ICE to Nazis and racists and terrorists.
What's your reaction?
Well, you know, when you have armed, masked men jumping out with weapons and chasing people through the streets, I beg to differ with him. That is what is causing the absolute outrage, because people understand that this is unconstitutional. This is not America. what is going on here, which is why I have defined this as an experiment. We are a petri dish for the nation, and I think that other cities need to be on alert, because what is being practiced and tried out here, I believe, is going to go to other cities. And I have to ask you, toward what end? Why do you have the Marines in Los Angeles? Why do you have the National Guard in Los Angeles? Why did you seize power from our governor, force the National Guard on us, requested it? We have a police department. We have a sheriff's department. We didn't need the assistance. We didn't ask for it. And we need for them to go back. They need for this to stop. And I'm hoping that the order that the judge rendered yesterday will be able to stand. I know it's going to be appealed, but I'm hoping that the appellate court will be willing to uphold the Constitution.
Look, at the end of the day, the Trump administration can do whatever they want. It doesn't matter if it's a sanctuary city. It doesn't matter if Karen Bass believes that she's protecting her Angelinos. It doesn't even matter. Superstar President Donald Trump and his administration are going after the bad guys, the criminals, but the mainstream liberal lapdog media never wants to talk about how these people are getting caught. They always want to talk about how they're being terrorized, because now they care about the criminals. They really care about criminals. So, as Karen Bass says it, let that sink in.